There might be another massive undertaking like a 1.8.4 undertaking, which I really don't want to happen again, but it might be necessary for New Frontier Craft to be a better game. The New Frontier Craft administration has decided that there still needs to be a change to how metals and ores are for the game to be a little bit better, because there's still the major complaint of New Frontier Craft and Survival that mining is boring. Now, I personally, as the creator and someone doesn't put too much time into games these days, like if I were to play New Frontier Craft myself, I don't know if I wouldn't put the time in to find diamonds, but I'd put time in to just have good time. I don't think it's that bad, but I can definitely see someone who is external and doesn't really know New Frontier Craft too well, or hardly at all, and finds New Frontier Craft to be pretty boring on the mining level. And I think there still needs to be yet another change, just for the general betterment of New Frontier Craft, because it is still quite a bit harder, and the large fact that you have to do some work to be able to progress a fair amount in the beginning of Survival, I think can be thrown out the window a bit. Of course, I don't think throwing it entirely out the window is the answer, because it has provided some interesting results for people who actually do get into New Frontier Craft, end up being incredible builders. It's kind of like a filter, but it's a little too strong still. Even after my large update for 1.8.4 to make it, less strong but still there, it looks like I'm going to make another update for, again, less strong but still there. And I hope that this update will appeal to a lot more people. So again, it's still going to be harder than vanilla, but it's going to be a little less hard than New Frontier Craft is currently. So my current plan right now is to throw a tier of metals, or not of metals, but a tier in the metal system out the window. So that will leave us with 7 tiers instead of 8, because there's technically 8 because it starts at tier 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 ending with diamond and osmium, and 0 being stone and wood. What I'll be doing is taking a tier out. So that means metals will be moved around a fair amount in how they are currently, and it'll make 7 in all tiers, with wood and stone starting as tier 1. This means that most of the metals, and pretty much almost all tiers from 0 to 3 or 4, are going to get at least buffed in both, or for the most part, durability. I know some people have wanted more speed, but it's going to mostly buff it in terms of durability. This might have some odd effects though. It looks so far like that there's going to be less ore, because this means that some ore is going to provide you with a lot more durability. So in order to have it balanced, originally, just the first tier of metals that you'll be finding, like aluminum, was going to be decreased by 30 to 50%. But I've recalculated a whole bunch of things. Now it's only going to be decreased around 20 to 15%. And I don't think that's too bad. You normally find tier 1 metals all over the place. So, and I myself, as the creator, when I'm playing Survival, I normally just end up leaving a bunch of tier 1 metals unmined, because I just never end up needing them. Of course, in the future, with an industrial update, we might need them, but at the moment, they're just kind of there, and even then, if I decrease the amounts, that just means it's just going to be less hard to make in the industrial update certain blocks and whatnot. Another reason why I think this might be a better change is not only, I might change stone so it's basically vanilla hardness, because it is a little bit harder in New Frontier Craft, and that makes all pickaxes slower, so I might make that a little easier, so then pretty much all speeds do also get higher. But another thing that this might make it easier is easier to understand, because instead of there being 8 tiers, there's now 7, and there's a lot more metals in just 1 tier, instead of metals being dispersed throughout 8 tiers, and in those 8 tiers, sometimes it'd only be, 3 metals. Now it's going to be more like 5 to 3 instead of 2 to 3. And that means less time progressing through metals. So it's not like the beginning of you trying to progress from 0 to 2, because normally that's kind of a painful progression. It's more just going to be 0 to 1. those will just kind of be the first tiers that'll make it a little bit of a difficult challenge. But once you're in tier 2, like that's basically going to be tier 3 and how New Frontier Craft is now, and it's going to be in like half the time. So it's still going to present a little bit of a challenge at first, but after that, it's all good. So I think that statement alone is going to make New Frontier Craft a lot funner of a game instead of the first hour being kind of hard. It'll be more like the first, I don't know, 30 minutes, 20 minutes, and I don't think that's bad at all. A lot of movement. There's going to be one large change, and that's iron is going to be rarer, which is going to be, like iron is going to be a lot more stronger in New Frontier Craft now with this change, because iron will be bumped up to tier 4. This also means iron is going to be a decent amount rarer. And I don't know what I'm going to do about that, because iron I want to use a lot in the industrial phase, so I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go with that yet. Perhaps it's just going to take less iron to make more things. I mean, that's already the case with rails. And this leads me into another point of, I'm developing new stuff that generates into the terrain, and this eventually will lead to like new dungeons, new things that you can find in the terrain that gives you loot. Like, let's say you find an abandoned rail area. It could be on top of the ground. It could be like this abandoned rail like station, or it could be under the ground like an abandoned rail cart thing. Not quite like it is in modern. And you could find a lot of rails, and that's how you could collect more rails in case that gets to be difficult. So in a sense, what I'm saying is, if this ends up being kind of awkward for building, because now metals are going to become less there, in a sense, even though they'll be a lot easier to use, I can kind of balance that with conquering dungeons. So, but of course, none of this has really been put in practice. If this ends up taking too long to try to balance out, I'm not sure if I'm going to go along with this. Because I do not want another 1.8.4 where I just keep having to test. Now I believe this is going to be easier again, because now there's going to be a much more defining thing, because having 8 tiers within the small amount of rock that you can dig into for Minecraft was really hard to balance. Now that there's only going to be, in a sense, 6 tiers of metals, because the first 2 tiers are just wood and stone, I think it's going to be a lot easier to balance this out. But we'll see. It might take a little bit again. So if it starts taking too long and it starts to backfire a bit, I'm going to try to find a different and shorter way to compensate for this. But until then, I'm going to attempt, and hopefully with some people to help me test a little bit, to do another reprogramming of the metals. Thanks for sticking with New Frontier Craft, and I'll see you on that server.